There are so many things going on in the courts. We talk about Congress, and there are things going on there as well. But, we've got at least a couple of cases that the Supreme Court has taken, Second Amendment cases. But there's a whole lot more than that going on. And who better to bring us up to speed on that than Kostas Moros from the Second Amendment Foundation. Kostas, I know that you're tracking, who knows, dozens of cases right now. But if we were going to pick maybe 2, 3 of them that are happening and things are happening right now, I'd love to start off with this Coons case, because that's very interesting.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for having me on. Coons is a very important case. It's the New Jersey basically ban on concealed carry, even with a permit, because they've restricted it in every place. And we got this pretty bad Third Circuit ruling a couple months back, which, although it struck down the vampire rule, which, as your listeners may recall, is the idea that all private property is off limits unless the owner posts a sign inviting them in. They did strike down that, so it wasn't all bad, but they basically upheld everything else, bars, playgrounds, restaurants that serve alcohol, parks, all that sort of stuff, libraries.
Jeez.
So the Third Circuit now, which has become a sort of anti-Ninth Circuit, has now granted en banc to Coons, which is terrific news. They're going to be hearing it again on February 11th, and we expect they will reverse at least a lot of the panel's ruling, if not all of it. So that's a very hopeful sign.
If they do, would you, and this would be a very good thing, but would you expect at that point for it to be appealed to the Supreme Court?
That's going to be the million-dollar question, because New Jersey's probably very frustrated right now because they're the only hardcore anti-gun state that's in a relatively pro-gun circuit, because California gets the 9th, New York gets the 2nd, which always rule in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
So now the Third Circuit's creating what's called circuit splits, if they do rule as we expect, which makes Supreme Court review more likely. So I imagine Attorney General Placken in New Jersey is going to be getting frantic calls from California and New York begging him not to appeal, because given that there is this circuit split now, it would make the Supreme Court granting him more likely, which would reverse New York and California's laws too. So
there's some real interesting strategy and chess moves going on here.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so we got the Coons case, and then we've got what's going on with the reciprocity?
Okay, so there's a couple cases pending on the issue of reciprocity right now. One of them is in Massachusetts. That was involved a New Hampshire resident who was carrying in Massachusetts. But we also have a case called Gardner v. Maryland, and that one is interesting because Miss Gardner is a Virginia resident, or was at the time, with a Virginia carry permit. And what happened was she got ran off the road while she was driving through, I think it was Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And so she defended herself. She didn't fire a gun, but she displayed her gun, dissuaded the person, and then the police came, and they didn't charge her with any crimes except carrying without a Maryland permit, and she has a Virginia permit. So she is a pro se plaintiff who petitioned all the way to the Supreme Court. And usually when you're pro se, which means you represent yourself, that's hopeless. The Supreme Court doesn't generally grant those petitions, but somebody on the court requested a response. That means at least one justice wants to hear what Maryland has to say. So that prompted us to file an amicus brief, which we filed yesterday. You can go read it online. And we're hopeful that the Supreme Court is serious about this, because it would be great if we got reciprocity, at least if other states had to honor permits, if nothing else.
What's that old line that someone who represents himself as a fool for a client?
Yeah, exactly. But hey, maybe she's the smart one. She got all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they requested a response. So good for her.
Well, exactly. Yeah. That is highly unlikely is in and of itself, and so that could be very interesting. And I think the point we ought to make here is that a lot of people have said, well, we have these reciprocity laws that keep getting introduced, or bills that keep getting introduced, and they get passed in the House, and we'll just get the Congress to pass that. And I just think that that's a losing proposition.
Yeah, and it's because of the filibuster, unfortunately. So it might get through the House, but unless you're going to get about 7 or 8 Democrats on your side, which you're not, then the filibuster makes it impossible in the Senate. I admit I get a little frustrated when our side kind of hypes this up. Like they'll say, oh, the House is voting on reciprocity. Oh, yeah, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, I guess it does. It's good that they have the vote so we know where our representatives stand. Don't get me wrong. They should try for it. But I don't like getting people's hopes up for no reason. However, if the Supreme Court were to grant review, that's very different. There's no filibuster there, so we would very much like to see the Supreme Court take up this issue.
What's going on at the Supreme Court? Because for a long time, they just avoided and wouldn't take any Second Amendment cases, and now they've accepted at least 2 for the next session.
Yeah, so they granted at our urging and at the urging of the Trump Department of Justice, actually, they granted cert in Wolford, which is a sensitive places case on that vampire rule I mentioned earlier, because the Ninth Circuit upheld the vampire rule, which even the Third Circuit panel didn't do. So the Supreme Court is going to be reviewing that. And they also granted review to a case called Hamani, which is a criminal case concerning it concerns marijuana use in guns, but not just marijuana use. We're a little frustrated that was the one they chose to decide that issue, because Hamani has all sorts of other more sordid facts. He's not just a guy who smoked some weed and had a gun, so we'll have to see how that shakes out. But today at their conference, actually, as we speak, they are considering a variety of cases, including Duncan, which is the magazine case in California for that my old colleagues at Michelle & Associates have brought. Gators guns, a couple of SBR cases, and a variety of other cases. It's a big Second Amendment day at the Supreme Court. We'll see if they grant anything or if they just keep relisting them to if they haven't decided yet what to do. So we're all waiting to hear.
Conference is when they all get together and talk about it, and then I guess on Monday we find out what decisions, if any, have been made, whether they're going to take it, not take it, or just relist it and keep kicking it down the road.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the last couple of weeks we've been hearing about the grants on Fridays. Like, even though typically the normal practice is they have the conference on Thursday or Friday, and then they tell us on Monday if there's any news. But last week we found out, for example, about the birthright citizenship case on Friday, right after the conference. So I'm going to keep refreshing the page this afternoon to see if we get any news. But usually it is the Monday after. Yeah, I suspect if I had to speculate, and this is pure speculation, I have no special knowledge, I think they're waiting for the Third and Seventh Circuit rulings, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them just keep holding the hardware cases until they have those rulings, so then they can decide which of all the cases they want to take up to decide these issues. At least that's my hope, yeah.
All right, let me ask you something else. We're hearing a lot of noise, and I call it that, specifically choosing that word, in the Second Amendment world. And some of the groups are saying, the Department of Justice, we couldn't trust them. We knew we couldn't trust Pam Bondi. They're not doing what we want. They're not going to, negate the NFA. And yet we see Harmeet Dillon doing amazing things and supporting gun rights in the Second Amendment. What is your take on where we are as of this moment in the Department of Justice?
Look, we're in a very good place, and I get a little frustrated at some of the doomsaying by some. Look, we disagree with them on the NFA. That's why the Second Amendment Foundation and other orgs besides ours have sued them. We don't agree with their defense of the NFA, for sure. However, compared to any other administration in modern history, this has been a very favorable environment for us. They filed amicus briefs in the Seventh and Third Circuits in support of our challenge to the assault weapons bans. They've sued Los Angeles over wait times. That's another SAF case we had to deal with before they did. They're doing a massive rights restoration. You have Harmeet Dillon out there talking about reciprocity. I hope they file an amicus brief in Gardner for that matter. So they are doing a lot of Second Amendment stuff. But I would remind people that, yes, generally the federal government will generally defend federal laws. That's just the way it is. In fact, it was a pleasant surprise that they came out and said in the Peterson case, that, although we think the NFA is constitutional, suppressors do get some degree of Second Amendment protection. And while I think a lot of people in red states might see that and say, well, so what? That's a wishy-washy thing to say. That's actually really helpful for those of us in California and similar states where suppressors are totally banned. It doesn't matter if we wanted to NFA register them. California says you can't have them at all, even if you're willing to register them. So that's where that kind of thing is helpful. Sometimes I feel like people in the red states that generally have it good kind of forget our struggles.
Right.
The NFA is an academic dispute for those of us in California.
Yeah, because you can't have them anyway. All right, so we are skipping over what may be the most important and interesting and fascinating and startling development, and that is in the Department of Justice, under the Civil Rights Division, they have established a Second Amendment section.
Yes, and a lot of people are very angry about this, which is kind of funny. But yes, on the anti-gun side, But yeah, we received the news that they are taking up the Second Amendment in a more serious way by making it an office within the Civil Rights Division, and that's fitting because the Second Amendment is, besides the First Amendment, our oldest, most fundamental civil right. So it's kind of crazy that it took until our 250th birthday as a nation to actually have this be a focus. To be fair, in Reconstruction, the Freedmen's Bureau did make protecting the right to bear arms a priority. But besides that, it's kind of just been something the government hasn't been involved with. And I was amused to see some of the reaction from the anti-gun side saying, "Oh no, how dare they do this?" It just reveals that they don't want the Second Amendment to be a right. They're upset that it is.
And I would position it and say, look, this is a major commitment from the Trump administration to support gun rights, to support the Second Amendment, and to put some real muscle, because unlike this phony office that Biden had for gun control in the White House, this is actually a part of the Department of Justice. They have law enforcement capability.
Yes, yeah, and they've already, even before the office was established, they started taking action. Like I mentioned, the lawsuit against Los Angeles for the long 2-year wait times for CCW permits. So I think this just formalizes that, and it makes it more likely we're going to see more things like that. So we're very hopeful, and we hope they continue doing that good work, even as, like I said, we might disagree with them on some things like the NFA.
You bet. Kostas Moros, thank you so much. I appreciate what you do and what you're doing at the Second Amendment Foundation, keeping us posted. It's a fascinating time, and the changes in the news, it just is hitting like every week there's something going on.
Yeah, Tom, it's great to be on. Thank you for having me, and happy to be on again when another 10 things happen.
We'll get you there. We appreciate that, sir. All right. Don't go far. We'll be right back with more Gun Talk.